Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and after fighting the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lee would assign Longstreet an independent command in southeast Virginia. Near Fredericksburg, a train came to a stop and Longstreet waited anxiously for the passengers to disembark from the train to the platform. Louise stepped from the train and her and the general hugged and then proceeded to an ambulance wagon that they used to transport her to Longstreet's headquarters. It was December 28, 1862, and Louise was to stay with her husband for a little while. She would stay at the family estate of Matilda Hamilton. Her and Louise would spend time together while Longstreet performed his military duties, but the general would visit throughout the day and spend every night with her. For the first couple of days riding back and forth from his headquarters to the Hamilton home, he passed through the camp of the Texas Brigade, who lobbed snowballs at him. Finally, after enduring it a few times, he found a line of them standing with snowballs in hand. He rode up to them and exclaimed, "Throw your snowballs, men, if you want to, as much as you please, but if one of them touches me, not a man in this brigade shall have a furlough this winter. Remember that." Not a snowball touched him. Poker was played nightly by Longstreet's staff, and hard liquor was passed around. On at least one occasion, Longstreet indulged and played a game of poker and became so drunk that he rode around on the back of a staff officer around the tent until both fell to the ground. During the winter, Longstreet's mind drifted west. His friend Joseph E. Johnston was heading to Tennessee, and after the defeat at Stone's River, Southerners clamored for the removal of Braxton Bragg as commander of the Army of Tennessee. Longstreet wrote to Lewis T. Wigfall, a former subordinate who resigned his commission to take a seat in the Confederate Senate, that he desired to be sent west because there seemed to be opportunities for all kinds of moves to great advantages. Longstreet advised Lee that one Army Corps could hold the line along the Rappahannock and the other, his, could be transported by train to Tennessee to help defeat the Union Army of the Cumberland. It can be assumed that Longstreet thought that with Johnston directly over him in the west, he could secure him the position of the Army of Tennessee if Bragg made another mistake. Lee waved off such a plan, but he did dispatch Longstreet, but not to Tennessee. Federal forces were being reinforced in southeastern Virginia and the coast of North Carolina. The 9th Army Corps steamed down the Potomac, so Lee sent Longstreet with 2 divisions, John Bell Hood's and George Pickett's, to the east of Richmond. G.W. Smith had resigned his position as commander of the Department of Virginia and North Carolina. Longstreet would assume that role. The department encompassed the land between New Bern, North Carolina, to Richmond, Virginia. Longstreet went to work stopping Federal incursions into the area, but he kept sufficient troops on hand to send to Lee at a moment's notice, in case General Hooker attempted to attack the Army of Northern Virginia. Southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina had been relatively untouched by Federal forces and had an abundance of foodstuffs that Lee's army could use, so Longstreet made preparations for the wheat, corn, and livestock to be sent north to the Rappahannock River. Longstreet distributed Pickett's division through northeastern North Carolina, laying siege to Washington, North Carolina, but failed to dislodge the Union troops. Despite some failures, the pressure put on the Federals convinced them not to invade too far inland. By April, Lee's army was barely holding on. Surviving on half rations and scurvy plagued the camps. Something had to be done to feed the troops. Lee and Longstreet decided to move toward the Union-occupied town of Suffolk, Virginia, in the form of a supply expedition. The divisions of Pickett and Hood arrived near the city on April 11th. Around 17,000 men dispersed through a 14-mile set of entrenchments around the city opposed Longstreet's troops. The general asked for naval assistance, knowing that only with its help could he capture the city. The president refused to release an ironclad to seal off the river approach. Longstreet estimated that an assault would result in about 3,000 casualties, so he settled in for a siege. Light skirmishing and artillery duels characterized the fighting at Suffolk, but a larger action occurred at Hill's Point, where Confederate artillery battled with Union gunboats. 270 men from Connecticut and New York landed by transport, drove away the Alabama infantry protecting the artillery, and captured the Southern artillery. It was a horrible blunder on the part of the Confederates. Longstreet was furious and blamed Samuel French, who commanded the artillery, even though he was in a sickbed when it occurred. French asked for a court of inquiry when reports he assumed from Longstreet spread that he was inadequate for his position, but President Davis denied the request. Beyond fighting, Longstreet had other problems. One of his division commanders, George Pickett, being close to the home of his sweetheart, would visit her incessantly, to the point that Longstreet got tired of it and denied him leave to visit. Pickett attempted to go around asking for Longstreet's permission and just ask Moxley Sorrell, but Sorrell said no, that he must ask the lieutenant general. Pickett pleaded with him, saying, "But he is tired of it and will refuse, and I must go. I must see her. I swear, Sorrell, I'll be back before anything can happen in the morning." Still, Sorrell refused to give him permission. Pickett then snuck away secretly to visit Sally. It was while Longstreet was commanding the department that he was introduced by a letter of introduction from the Secretary of War James Seddon to Henry Thomas Harrison, also known as Harrison the Scout. The professional scout was paid in United States greenbacks, not Confederate notes, which made him expensive, but he was good at his job. The supply expedition was a success. Longstreet's commissary chief collected enough supplies in the department to feed Lee's army for about 2 months. At the end of April, the military situation changed. Hooker's army was on the move, getting ready to cross the Rappahannock River. Lee wired Longstreet to his assistance. It would take some time to get the provisions on the way, but Longstreet prepared to go. Longstreet's troops and he himself wouldn't arrive in Richmond from Suffolk until May 5th. The fighting at Chancellorsville would end on May 6th. Longstreet has long been criticized for not being with Lee at Chancellorsville, but he is not to blame. His job was to secure food for the Army of Northern Virginia. When Lee called him north, Longstreet had to make sure the wagons laden with goods made it to their destination, and that would take time. Even Lee admitted that he did not believe Longstreet would arrive in time. Therefore, Longstreet is not at fault. Despite his absence, Lee won an incredible victory at Chancellorsville, defeating a numerically superior force with a large section of his own force absent. On May 6th, Longstreet met with Secretary of War James Seddon. He discussed the war in the West. Longstreet's friend, Ulysses S. Grant, was heavily involved in operations to secure the Mississippi River for the Union, and William S. Rosecrans of the Army of the Cumberland occupied Middle Tennessee. Longstreet suggested that Johnston's force in Mississippi be combined with Bragg's and send himself with Pickett and Hood to Tennessee to grow the numbers of that army, to overwhelm Rosecrans and push north, threatening Cincinnati. Longstreet hoped that that would pull Grant away from the Mississippi River. Lee had made his thoughts known to Seddon and the President. He didn't believe such an invasion would stop Grant from trying to capture Vicksburg. He also thought that sending Pickett or Hood or both to Tennessee wouldn't be wise because the Union could shift troops between theaters quicker than they could. This would put the Army of Northern Virginia at a disadvantage. Ultimately, it was decided to send Longstreet back to Lee. Hopefully another invasion of the North by Lee could divert the attention from the Mississippi and relieve other areas of the South.